Well, hello, Doug and I are here to talk about Neuralink's first patient and other things. It's Friday, March 22, 2024. And so I'm starting with that Neuralink story. I've been waiting for this for years. When you have a Google chip in your brain, and then Elon Musk was going to do it with Neuralink, and there were all these scandals about them abusing and killing monkeys, but they've now done it to the first human. There's a quadriplegic who had a diving accident. He's totally paralyzed below the shoulders, but now he has a Neuralink implant, and he can now play video games and use the internet and win chess games on the computer, and he's very happy staying up late at night playing video games now.
Is that right?
Yeah, they got a picture of the guy. He says this thing is great. He's happy with it. He can now control a computer efficiently from just his brain.
So it's working flawlessly?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I mean, and by the way, there have been much of these that have done before. I remember there used to be headbands. You can just control it with muscles in your head and stuff. So I'm not
Yeah.
actually sure how much of a revolutionary step forward this is. But anyway, it's the first step of Neuralink. And of course, if they get this working well enough, then even people that are not handicapped might want to get it, but we'll see. Anyways, it's a step forward for the company, Neuralink, which
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
going nowhere for many years. And so, I imagine it took them some time to learn how to do it and such. There aren't a lot of details here. These things typically take you some practice and time to learn how to use them. But
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. It's one step in progress, and
yeah, but a huge
see where
step.
this
I mean, the
goes.
last I heard about this a couple of years ago, it wasn't even safe for monkeys. And now apparently it's safe for people. So that's a big step forward.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Keep an eye on that one, huh?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, when I first heard about it 15 years ago, I said, boy, I want to get one of those. And I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like it's like going to Mars. That sounds great until you find out the downside and you say, well, maybe that's not such a great idea.
Yeah, Sam, interesting you brought that up. I was just thinking about this. On the trip to Mars, when people are in the International Space Station, they have to exercise all the time,
And even
right?
though
But
they lose bone mass and everything, your body
yeah,
just isn't designed for low gravity.
yeah. So what about on a trip to Mars? Aren't they going to lose too much mass? I'm
Yes.
I'm just
Well, yeah, but on the plus side, the radiation might kill you first.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So you
So
got that to look forward to. I mean, I know. I mean, you'll arrive at the other end, a medical disaster with no way back.
well, you'll be a jellyfish, right? No bones.
Not quite, but yeah, I mean, you'll be, and you can't, it's just, it seems like a
So
really bad idea. And we're going to start having a long-term presence on the moon. We're going to have astronauts living on the moon soon, or so they say. And I don't understand how they're going to maintain their health. It just seems like a highly unwise place to live.
yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is nobody has ever addressed that or brought that up, right? On the
Well,
trip to Mars?
oh, sure they have. They've talked
Oh, they
about
have?
making something you can spin to make artificial gravity.
Ah,
That could be
okay,
one way to.
okay.
The problem is all that stuff is too expensive. You could also take enough shielding to protect you from radiation, but that's also too expensive. And it reminds
Yeah.
me of, I don't know if you saw Dark Star. Dark Star was like the first um, negative science fiction movie from the famous horror movie producer. And he did it as his grad school project. And in this, these guys call home from their spaceship, and the guy says, "Oh yes, and in other news, your request for additional radiation shielding has not been approved, but we're sure you guys will make do." And that's what it's going to be on the trip to Mars. Anyway, what have you got?
All right. So here's one. Remember my family got a invoice from Fast Track. Whoop, I spelled that wrong.
Fast track?
So yeah, Fast Track, which is the
Really?
toll.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
toll thing. I think mine automatically fills.
Well,
I never get an invoice.
yeah, so that's why this is a scam. So
Oh,
it's a $3.95 email or charge for email. And you look at it, the logo is right, but you think about the dollar amount, and what bridge toll is $3.95?
yeah, I signed up for the thing like 8, 10 years ago. I vaguely remember it saying every time it fell below $10, it would add $20 or something like that.
And it does. And I kept thinking, boy, 395, that doesn't sound right. And then I thought, well, maybe it's one of the HOV lanes. that she didn't have her little fast track, tag. But I can't even think of where a fast track lane is, or an express lane that's 395. So I told her call up. So she calls up Fast Track and they said, "Oh yeah, it's a scam. We're getting hundreds of these calls every day."
So they just collect your credit card number when you pay or something?
Yeah, so it's a low-hanging fruit. Click on the link to pay your toll,
Oh, and then you get
insert
malware.
credit card.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, it threw me off guard. It caught me, but that's why we had her call.
Yeah, that's social engineering. I mean,
Yeah,
nobody's
yeah.
immune. You think you're smart, but the fact is, every day, thousands of things go by, and a bunch of them are just not interesting, and you try to just swat them away like a fly.
But like I said, this one is plausible.
Yeah,
You know, you, you don't want to not pay it because then the fees go up. And
I
the other one I was going to say is the other thing that kind of tipped me off a little bit was that the pay date was in a week or 2 weeks.
yeah, it's a little screwy.
Yeah, so I thought, well, maybe she missed, a couple of the earlier emails, but that doesn't make sense.
I
So,
remember a couple of years ago, the phone guys called me with the Comcast line that they're about to change the rates, but you can lock in the old rate by prepaying a year in advance. And I was
yeah.
really falling for it until they said you have to go buy gift cards. And I said, gift cards? Then I Googled it, and everyone's saying this scam is so great it fooled Comcast employees. And I said, hey, you guys are famous. You're on the TV. And then they hung up on me. It was a really good scam. I mean, I was really thinking that sounds really, really plausible.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Huh. All right, what's your next story here?
Well, there's a story at Wired where they say these pop-ups, these irritating pop-ups that say there are cookies on this site. I haven't seen any of those in a long time. I guess my browser must remember that I clicked OK or something. But apparently, if you look at them, now they tell you how many other businesses they're sharing your information with. And the answer is
Oh,
thousands. They're now
wow.
they're now required to tell you how many times they're selling your data. And they interviewed the top 10,000 most popular websites and show dozens of them are sharing with more than 1,000 companies. So I'm not quite sure what I'd have to do to make those pop-ups appear again, but it sounds like they'd be a little more informative. So this is, the ever increasing scandal of those data brokers, how much data they're taking and how far it's going.
Yeah, interesting, huh? We should talk about chat uh TikTok a little bit, that they're trying to outlaw that.
Well, they're
And
trying
that,
to force a sale to an American company.
right, yeah, exactly.
So it's not
Or
really
yeah.
going to go away, not unless they refuse to do that. And I think I agree with Scott Galloway's analysis that the economic argument is so huge that they are going to sell.
Well, here, let me just ask you this. On the flip side, this is a commentary that I heard.
Yeah.
So what's TikTok after, or what's China after? Information
Well,
about the viewers.
well, I don't think so. I think that's garbage. I mean, they could just buy that information from data brokers like everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean,
Exactly.
that's just a lie. I mean, the only
Right.
argument that makes any sense is that they're using it to spread propaganda, and that I also think is garbage. But a lot of people on Capitol Hill really believe this, that they're now they say you wouldn't let China own like CNN or Fox because you can't have a foreign agent that's hostile controlling the main news source. And they say for people below 25, TikTok is their main news source.
Yeah.
And
I see. I see.
and then they said one argument was that like 80% of the content on TikTok about the Israeli-Hamas war is pro-Palestinian, and therefore this is well, and they also say if you ask people to watch TikTok about the Uyghurs in China, and the Tibetans, they say, oh, those people are no good because apparently what they're seeing is like slanted towards the Chinese Communist Party. But I'm not convinced this is a official government propaganda. I think it's just a reflection of the population on TikTok.
Yeah.
And when I
Yeah.
talk to my Chinese
Yeah.
students, you can say they've fallen for Chinese propaganda, but of course they mostly have the main Chinese line, like anybody would. You're in that country, you believe mostly what you see. Um, so anyway, that's the argument, is that they're going to use it as a propaganda tool on our kids, and therefore it must be owned by an American company. That may eventually win.
Well, so what you're saying is we need to indoctrinate American kids with American propaganda, not
Yes,
Chinese propaganda.
that's
Okay.
exactly it. I remember when I was like a teenager and I started reading some history about the Roman Empire and how at that time the Romans believed we will just slaughter these barbarians and offer them the benefit of Roman civilization, and they'll be grateful that we killed off their gods and their culture and made them like us because they're just horrible, inferior beings. And the Roman citizens are superior. And I said, I wonder what it would be like to be in Rome and not be aware of it. Because that's kind of what we are as Americans.
Yeah.
We're the new
Yeah. Yeah.
Romans, and we think we're better than everybody else. We think everybody else just wants to be just like us.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, on a somewhat related story,
Yeah.
in California, we have Senate Bill 976 to protect children, right? Protect kids from online addictive social media feeds. So they're trying to pass a bill. I'm not sure where this is at, but it's SB 976. And it's trying to ban addictive, I guess is the word here, social media. How do you define that? To minors without consent of the youth's parent or guardian. And this bill would also prohibit social media platform from sending notifications to minors during overnight hours and during the school day without consent of the parent or guardian. Now, we'll see where this goes.
Classic
But
nanny state stuff.
yep, yep. And Sam, I got a question for you. Are social media companies designed their platforms to addict users? This is a question of addiction.
Well, I think fundamentally, places like Facebook automatically optimize to get more clicks and to get you to spend more time on the platform. I mean, they've made this clear. That is their goal.
Well, isn't that what TV is about? Radio?
Yes, yes, of course. They're
Yeah,
also designed that way. So I think you could call that addiction. I don't know. They do try to keep your attention. Like I remember in the early days, Yahoo was like a portal, and you click and go somewhere else. And then people
yeah,
said, "Wait, this is no good. They're leaving us. We want to make sure they stay right on our service. They don't go somewhere else."
yeah. So I'm not disagreeing, and I can tell you when I grew up, there used to be bumper stickers that TV is a drug,
I
meaning,
And that's not entirely wrong.
no, I would agree. I would
Some
agree.
there's some truth to it. And
So
sport,
just
radio, and
quickly,
comic books and video games and everything, every new
yeah,
thing kids do, they of course do to some kind of excess, and the older generation is mad about it.
yeah. So I'm looking here, just quick definition of addiction, because I'm curious about this. It's addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. Okay,
Right.
that meets the definition.
Like
I don't know
gambling
if that's,
addiction, where you do this thing
yeah.
even when you know it's bad for you, but you can't make yourself stop.
Yeah, and Sam, do you know I think it was an Alzheimer's drug or Parkinson's medication that was argued that causes people to be addicted to gambling?
Yes, there are real drugs with known side effects
Yeah,
of that. So it
yeah,
does suggest that there's like a particular part of your brain that can be like suppressed or something, and then you're driven to these compulsive behaviors.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll see where that bill goes, but I'm surprised they didn't put in there we're going to prevent child pornography or save the children because everybody wants those bills to
Well,
pass.
there is one called Kids Online Safety Act that people are real mad about, which I think does touch pornography and other things. There's a national one people are pushing. And these things are always hard. I remember when I was a kid, there was the comic books code that had these moral rules for TV shows and comic books. Like
Yeah, well,
one thing I noticed is every time there's a fortune teller or anybody doing magic, it always comes to a bad end. And that's officially part of the code. You cannot possibly have a fortune teller that ever comes through or magic that ever turns out good. Like you can never have anybody shoot anybody with a gun. If you watch kids' cartoons, they always like shoot a gun at like a rock, which then falls on somebody or something, because they can't portray anybody shooting someone else with a gun.
yeah, Roadrunner cartoons, right?
There are a bunch of rules like that.
Interesting.
And when I was a kid, comic books all had a little stamp in the corner, comics book code. This comic obeys the comic book code, and without that stamp, you couldn't sell it. It was like the stamp on a bottle of alcohol, certified by the They paid their taxes. And there were rules. There were a bunch of rules on what could happen in the story.
Yeah, so I don't know if you recall, but religious leaders attacked comic books, I think in the 50s,
Oh
60s.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
because they're all, a lot of them are full of like magic and occult stuff and superpowers and all these things that are deemed to be unhealthy.
yeah, yeah. Well, and the
And you
same
could
with,
argue that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I remember my mom used to ask me, why do you think you have to be perfect? And I said, I wonder why. Perhaps from all those superhero comic books where I think I'm not anybody unless I'm saving the whole world. That might be where I got that idea. It does feed
yeah.
some kind of male narcissism.
Yeah, interesting. That yeah, I did a few years back listen to the history of comic books and DC Comics and Marvel, and it's interesting the rival that they had, but then the attack that the government launched against them. And I think if I'm not incorrectly remembering, there was a religious element to that they were like the work of the devil, like
Oh yeah.
dancing and rock and roll music and gum and
Oh yeah.
on and on and on. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And as always, this stuff is kind of exaggerated, but there's a grain of truth in it.
true.
Yeah. In fact, this makes me feel like mentioning this last one I saw, or the FBI. You may remember this about 6 months ago. The Republicans decided that when the Biden administration tells social media networks, hey, this thing you're putting out is known Russian disinformation. You shouldn't be publishing that. They said, well, you're censoring the news. And so they stopped it. And the Biden information stopped informing social media companies about anything for 6 months because it was under court review. And now the arguments in the Supreme Court, they haven't rendered a verdict yet, but they're suggesting that they are not in favor of this. And so 2 weeks ago, the FBI has resumed outreach to social media companies to warn them when they're publishing known foreign propaganda. So apparently that is going to be allowed again. And that's another case very much like what we were saying. At first, I thought that's ridiculous. And I said, well, they kind of have a point. If you have a government ministry of truth telling the media what truth is, that kind of is a really bad thing to start doing.
Yeah, well, isn't that kind of what we're talking about with TikTok?
It is, and also with the comic books. And it started with the vaccine. The government tried telling people, don't tell people not to take the COVID vaccine because it's really good. Don't publish statements that it's going to kill you when it's not. And then they said, you're publishing things that aren't true. And then, of course, people argued that it wasn't that clear. And the Republicans said, you're censoring great right-wing points of view preferentially.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like all of these things, there's some truth on both sides.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like with a vaccine, it's not 100% successful.
It turned out to be a
However,
lot less valuable. We originally thought it would
yeah,
end the outbreak, stop you from transmitting it and everything. It turned out not to do that, but it does save your life. So it's of some value, but it was less
yeah,
good than they thought it was. So all the people saying you're lying, you're exaggerating it, you're lying about it, they were kind of right.
yeah, yeah. Do you know Diana, the physics girl? She's been on PBS, KQED.
I don't know.
Okay, so she has a degree in physics from MIT. She does a lot of social media channels, YouTube videos, things like that. She came down with long COVID, and I think for the past 9 months she's been bedridden, and she can't see any light, loud noises, and I don't know what her status is right now, but as of a few months ago, she was completely bedridden. And I think it's almost going on to a year.
That does
So
happen sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So for the people who say that long COVID is doesn't exist, is not a real thing, here
Oh,
you have one person that is,
well, I've
that
never
I
heard
know
anybody say it's not
of.
real because there are a lot of cases like that.
Oh no, early on there was a lot of arguments against it.
Oh,
It's like I heard those.
well, I know a woman that got myocarditis for months, and that's a pretty
Yeah,
common side effect. So, I mean, I think the chance is not large. It's like 1 or 2%, but a significant number of people really do get long COVID. And I've heard if you
yeah,
define long COVID as just symptoms that go for a month or two, I've heard it's like maybe 50% of them get long COVID in that regard. But these really serious cases are more rare, but it can really be, you get like brain fog where you can't think.
Yeah, yeah. And in the sense of smell, I've got a couple family members that had COVID. They still don't have their sense of smell,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
exactly.
interesting, right? It'd be interesting to see what the mechanism is.
Yes, it's a lot like age. I think it'll take decades of research to
Yeah,
really understand exactly what it's doing, but it's clearly doing a lot more than just messing with your lungs. I've heard people say it's primarily actually a blood disease that sometimes manifests in the lung and then attacks other organs. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's not
So
a small matter.
we're still learning. This is an experiment in progress, and there's a lot of information that we don't, or a lot of things we don't know about it that we're still learning.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Mhm.
What do you got next? My turn or
Uh,
yours?
I might as well do this one. There's
Okay.
um, I didn't know about this. Amazon EC2 storage buckets are
Yeah.
databases where you can store a lot of data. And unfortunately, until about 2 years ago, the default was publicly available to everyone. So all these companies put their data up there and exposed it to the whole world. It became the number one source of data breaches for a while, even beating SQL injection. And I didn't know this, but Google Cloud has the same thing. It's called Firebase. And a researcher just went and found there are 900 wide open Firebase buckets exposing millions of records. So apparently, a bunch of people are putting it in the Google Cloud and turning it on to like full read. Everybody can read it without knowing that. So, uh, it's the same old story. But anyway, this is why, by the way, this is the number one concern of companies when they talk about putting their data in the cloud is, well, isn't there going to be a security problem? And the answer is yes, there is really going to be a security problem. You really better be careful. Putting your stuff in the cloud does have a significant risk of just handing it out to the whole world if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the argument is put your data in the cloud. You now have shared ownership. You don't have complete control over it.
That's true too. If you have an
Yeah.
instant, it's hard to get the logs and such. But the plus side is you don't have to maintain your servers and backups. You've outsourced that, and now everybody can access it everywhere. In most cases, the
Yeah.
benefits are large enough to motivate people to do it, but they really should try to get some competent security people helping them secure their cloud.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I worked for some companies working on legal cases, and none of that data could be shared in the cloud, put in the cloud.
I'm working for some critical infrastructure companies, and they
Yeah,
have rules that you cannot put stuff in the cloud. Even
yeah,
services that market themselves and they want you to use their server in the cloud, they say, that's nice, but we can't use it that way. We have to install it on our own server for
yeah,
this reason. Not a
yeah,
bad policy. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, here's one. This is out of New Jersey. There's a New Jersey cell phone man or a cell phone store, and it was one of the large cell phone carriers. They won't mention who it is. It's been redacted in the court documents as Company One. Anyway, this New Jersey cell phone store manager pleaded guilty to cell phone SIM swapping scheme. He was paid $1,000 per. This is yeah, $1,000 per SIM swap in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And the way that law enforcement kind of tracked it down is through cryptocurrency payments back to the manager. So there's a lot we could talk about in this story. But the deal was somebody would go in, I guess, get a new phone, and he would swap or the SIM, do an eSIM, give that SIM to somebody else who then had access to one-time passwords and
Right. That's just
text
wrong.
messages, yeah, to go in and get somebody's account.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. This is an inside job, obviously, and I think he's getting 2, 3 years of free room and board in some institution that we're taxpayers are funding.
I would imagine. Yeah. And I'm surprised. It's interesting they tracked him down by tracking the cryptocurrency.
Right.
You could hide your cryptocurrency payments if you did it right, but they usually don't. They're breaking into the mixers and the anonymizers. Law enforcement is getting pretty good at tracking down cryptocurrency payments.
Yeah, yeah. This is not the first case that I've heard of where a suspect has been tracked through cryptocurrency.
No, it's not. And I remember they actually clawed back most of the money paid for the Colonial Oil Pipeline, and they
Yeah,
followed the ransomware to Black Cat recently from the people with the medical and payments. It's cryptocurrency is getting under government control more and more.
yeah. So the medical, the Black Cat, is
Yeah.
that still? Do you have an update on that story?
The news I've seen said they're still having trouble getting payments processed. Their servers have not been restored. They're still not working, and it's been like 3 weeks. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, this is affects 1 in 3 medical records of people in the US are out there floating around, which is pretty disturbing, I would argue.
I would think by now there must be a lot of people that are unable to get their medicine.
Yeah, yeah. Plus the people that can't get their medicine, and I spoke to somebody about a week and a half ago, and they weren't able to get it. It was delayed. So
Yeah, that's not good.
yeah, yeah. What you got another? So we'll keep
Yeah,
we got to keep track of that one.
yeah.
That to me is kind of like Colonial Pipeline. That's a big
Very,
story.
very much like it. Even in the time
Yeah,
range and the dollar value and everything is very much similar.
yeah, yeah. What else you have for us?
Well, Google has put out a paper enumerating their threat model for post-quantum cryptography. And I've been sort of ignoring this for years. I learned how the post-quantum cryptography works and I put it in my classes. And I said, well, we don't have to worry about it for years because quantum computers are nowhere near powerful enough to actually break cryptography. But Google says they think quantum computers will destroy existing public key systems within 10 to 15 years. And if that is
Hmm.
true, then it is time to switch now. And they say the other thing that bothered me, we had several proposed post quantum systems that were hacked, including Google's proposal, A New Hope. That was the one I was just ready to teach students, and then somebody hacked it and it fell. So there's not a lot of confidence that the one that's been approved, called Kyber, is not also going to fall. So what Google said is just what I hoped they would say. They say what you have to do is now migrate to post-quantum cryptography, but you have to have 2 layers of cryptography. First, encrypt with the old system, and then encrypt again with the new system because you can't trust either of them. And that is the right move. Then, if one of them falls, you still have the other.
Well, but can't the other be um, um, circumvented as well?
Yes, but the point is, if you have encrypted with the post quantum and the quantum algorithm, the only way a person can get in is if they hack both of those.
I see. I see. I
So the
see.
only this is the best you can possibly do to protect your data, and you need to do it now because people could just archive your data and then decrypt it in 15 years when the quantum computers become available.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what the NSA
Yes.
and maybe I have the right in Utah,
Oh,
that
yes.
large, yeah,
Yes,
that
a huge
that
complex in
tops.
Utah. They're archiving all the internet, and they have a much more realistic model. They don't plan on cracking it with quantum cryptography. What they figure is sooner or later we're going to find the bad guy's server and seize it and take the private key off the server, and then we'll be able to decrypt this stuff, which is
I
what
see.
happens. So they're
Yeah.
right. If
Yeah.
they archive that stuff, they are going to find keys eventually that will let them in. Although that's why Snowden messed it up by forcing everyone to upgrade to TLS 1.2. And TLS 1.2 has a separate session key for each session.
Yeah. Right.
Still the
Right.
permanent secret, you still can't get in. So the stuff encrypted with TLS 1.2 or later, I would argue is probably not even worth archiving in that data center because you're probably never going to get in there. But I think they are archiving it, even though there's no publicly known way to get in. Some system may eventually be developed to get in.
Yeah. 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 All right.
But
Well,
anyway, I
we'll
guess you have to
see.
take Crystal Kyber more seriously than I've been taking it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
You have another one for us? If
Well,
not,
I've got a couple more, but might as well do
okay.
yours. Go ahead.
Well, this is an interesting one. In the education world, educators have been arguing against the use of Chat GPT and it's evil and
Well,
students are
you could totally
cheating.
cheat on a normal test. That's true.
Yeah, yep. So now people in the education community are starting to come around and saying, we've got to accept it. It's like the internet. It's
Yeah.
here. It's
Yeah.
like books, right?
And
We've
calculators.
Yeah. So now what they're doing is coming up with different ways to use Chat GPT in the classroom and promote the use, which is what I think they should be doing,
Yes.
right? And they're also coming up with some clever ways of preventing cheating by creating Chat GPT worlds, if you will, and then having students write about those worlds. I'm not exactly sure what some teachers are doing to do that, but that way it's an individual's work based on the Chat GPT environment, if you will. And so it's harder to cheat on that because it's a person's experience rather than writing a paper.
I
You
don't
look puzzled
understand
on
that.
that.
Do you understand that? I don't understand how that would work.
Well, what they're trying to say is instead of reading a book and writing a paper, which ChatGPT could do,
Okay.
they're creating a fictitious world that ChatGPT would not know about, and they're giving assignments based on that environment where the student has to use ChatGPT, but then come away with their own opinions. You still look puzzled. Maybe I'll have to do some
I'm
research
still
on
a little
that one.
puzzled
Okay.
because whatever description of that world you give them, they could just feed it into ChatGPT.
But yeah, okay. Like I say, I need to do a little bit more research or
Yeah.
digging on this, but but they could feed it into Chat GPT, but if the teacher is constantly changing it, then we're adding different parameters. It makes it more challenging for the students.
Mm,
That's my understanding.
mm.
It's a way of it's a way of utilizing Chat GPT in the classroom and preventing cheating because it adds an element of randomness and personal opinion to it.
Well,
That
I don't
that was
understand, but this certainly is a big issue. I had a big discussion among teachers in my department meeting about this,
Yeah,
with no clear conclusion.
yeah, yeah. Well, some teachers absolutely hate it, despise it, but they also hate cell phones and the internet and everything else that goes along with it.
Well, I understand. I mean, if you
I
think
do.
your job is to
Yep.
measure the student's performance, then this is totally messing that up. And if students want to cheat, they totally can cheat and get an A in your class without doing any of the work and without learning anything. So I understand there's a concern.
Yeah. Interestingly, a sidebar to the story was that they did a survey of high school students to see what percentage of them are cheating. And
Yeah.
I think it was somewhere around 60%.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it,
when I got my
yeah,
first teaching job, the woman that hired me said, you have to understand 90% of students will cheat under pressure. And that's
yeah,
absolutely true. If it's difficult, they will cheat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I would agree with that. So the point being there is if they're cheating using Chat GPT, what difference does it make if they're cheating on a test and cheating using Chat GPT?
Well, it's just
It's a
another
time
tool.
saver.
Yeah. Well, and this is why so another teacher told me when I was not in the mood to listen to it, he said, you have to redesign your course so that there's less of this pressure and urgency that makes them cheat and they're having more fun. That's probably what you have to do. That's what I do now.
Yeah,
My classes have high morale and the students are pretty much doing this because they want to do it. And so I think that limits the cheating, although I'm sure it's not zero.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. But
All
I'm
right,
interested.
what else you want to share with us, Sam?
I got a couple more. One I thought was amazing. There's a new DOS attack, which is very cute at layer 7. You find a service like DNS, you send your DNS server a malformed record, which will result in an error message. What you need is a protocol, which when it receives an error message, will reply with another error message. And it turns out there are a bunch of these protocols. Then you can start bouncing no bad, bouncing error messages across, flooding the wire. And it turns out a whole bunch of protocols are vulnerable to this in many implementations, like uh, DNS, NTP, TFTP, and others. So,
So
yeah,
so this is like getting a web page or email where you get a 404 error
right,
message,
right,
something like that. Except we're not at a lower layer, we're up at layer 7, so
right.
this would be FTP Who
Yeah.
else is? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
TFTP had this problem. The first implementation of TFTP, according to the specs, said
Yeah.
you must acknowledge every message, and when you get an error, you must send an error message, which must be acknowledged, and you have to acknowledge the acknowledgement. So it would go bing, 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 bing.
I see. I see.
And
I see.
apparently a bunch of services still have that problem. There was an IPv6 attack like this too. If you had a cable with one IPv6 address at one end, and it said, I only have a limited local network and the rest of the addresses are over here. And then you'd send it to the other end. You could give it an address that was not at either end. So it would, this guy would forward it to that one. This guy, oh, I don't have it, forward it to this one. It would go bing, 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 bing. This happens a lot of times. This is why we have TTL in IP,
Yep.
because it is not that difficult. And also, this is why we have STP at layer 2. It's pretty
Layer
easy to have
two.
a signal that just bounces around among your devices forever.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
and I got,
All right. You have one more for us
I do
today?
have one more, which just saw it in the morning, right before the podcast. Another Dan Gooden article at Ars Technica. Apple, it turns out there's another Spectre and Meltdown type flaw. Apple chips, the Apple M1 and M2, and I suppose also the M3, their new silicon chips have a special hardware feature to try to perform fixed time computing. Now, to avoid timing side channels in encryption, you want to encrypt, so it always takes the same amount of time to encrypt, regardless of whether the key is full of zeros or ones. Whereas if you were to write an efficient algorithm, it would like skip over the zeros and only process the ones, and then the time it took to encrypt would leak out information about the key. So they have special
Yeah.
hardware components to do that, and it turns out they don't work. There's a flaw in them having to do with caching, so that you can the constant time algorithm can fail and can be tricked into doing something which does leak a timing channel. And in practice, they are able to pump out a key in a reasonable amount of time. They have to have a local process running on your Mac, but then they can dump out an RSA key in like 26 minutes and a Kyber or dilithium key in like a few hours.
Really?
But you remember, and they say right now, so it is like Spectre and Meltdown, and like Spectre and Meltdown, it's in the hardware of the chip and cannot be patched. So the only solution is to change the algorithm to not use these enhanced features, and that can slow everything down by like a factor of 2, which is again
Wow.
like Spectre and Meltdown. Remember, they had these optimization routines that leaked out secrets, and the fix was to slow everything down by up to a factor of 2.
Yeah. So what this is kind of like when you're doing encryption. If you have a motorcycle, it encrypts very quickly, but if you have a bus or a train load, it takes much longer.
Well,
And so,
that's different hardware. I mean, the real
yeah.
problem here is that the time it takes to encrypt depends on the key.
Oh, on
One
the
key will
key.
take longer. The other key,
I
like
see.
if the key has a lot of ones, you have to do a lot of operations. If the key has a lot of zeros, you can skip over more of it, so it goes faster.
I see. So this
That's,
isn't the data that we're talking about, it's the key.
well, therefore, that's right. But the problem
Yeah.
is the
Okay.
side channel. What happens is the time it takes
Yeah.
depends on your secret. So you're learning some information about the secret by watching how long it takes.
I see. I see. Got it. Got it.
And
Okay.
that's a huge problem. It's been a problem forever. How do you write a routine that doesn't have timing side channels? And they tried to the old routines to improve timing time to avoid this, slowed everything down. But now they had special hardware implementation to try to
To accelerate it. Yeah.
prevent timing side channels without slowing things down too much. And they turned out to have a flaw. So all hardware optimization tends to leak information. There's a fundamental problem here. It reminds me of the one we talked about before, where if you have a ChatGPT system sending you words one by one, even though they're encrypted, you can tell from the size of the package what words are being sent. So there's just a fundamental problem with any kind of optimization tends to leak out information about the secret.
Yeah. Well, there was a TV show, I can't remember what it was, but there was a document with redactions in it with people's names.
Yeah,
And they took a Sharpie black pen, and you could tell that the names were short.
yeah.
or a number of characters in each name, and you knew some of the parties that were involved. So it was pretty easy to figure out who we're talking about, even though it's been redacted.
Oh, and I've been hearing about this over several years in the Trump trials. They talk about witness number one, unindicted co-conspirator number 2 and 3, and everybody can pretty quickly guess who they are.
Yeah.
The science of redaction is very much like the science of cryptography. How do you hide information so it's really hidden? And it
Yeah.
turns out
Yeah.
that it's a lot harder than you think it is. Every reasonable attempt to hide it, in fact, leaks out some information.
Right. Right. You just change the kerning of the letters.
That's right. That would help.
That
Yeah.
would help, right?
Yeah.
Or you make it fully justified left and right, so there's a lot of white space.
Yep. Yep. I remember when people did that in letters, and I said, why does this stuff look weird and hard to read?
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right. Well,
That's it for me.
that's it for me too.
All
So I
right.
guess we'll have another one of these on Tuesday.
Tuesday sounds good. Take care.
Okay.